Have you ever felt the ground shift beneath your feet? Not in an earthquake, but in your life. A single event, so monumental, so life-altering, that it fractures your reality into a before and an after, leaving you standing in the rubble of the world you thought you knew. My name is Walt Bennett, and for 67 years, my reality was built on a foundation of evidence, logic, and the quiet, methodical study of death. I was a forensic toxicologist. I spoke the silent language of poisons. I read the stories they left in the blood and tissue of the departed. I thought I understood the darkest corners of the human heart, the twisted paths that lead a person to commit the ultimate transgression. I was wrong, so profoundly wrong. The day I won $20 million in the lottery, I didn't just win money. I won a terrifying front row seat to a betrayal so deep, so cold-blooded. It would force me to use every skill I'd ever learned, not just to solve a crime, but to prevent my own murder and to turn the tables on the man who wanted me dead. This is the story of how a lifetime spent hunting poisoners became the perfect weapon to save my own life, and how the sweetest revenge is the one served with cold, hard facts. If you've ever been blindsided by someone you trusted, if you've ever felt that sickening drop in your stomach when you realize someone you loved has a monster hiding inside, then hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and settle in. This isn't just a story about winning the lottery. It's a story about justice and the heavy, often bitter price of seeing the truth. And as we begin this journey together, do me a favor. Write in the comments what time it is in your part of the world right now. It's a small way to remind ourselves that no matter what we go through, we're all connected in this vast, strange human experience, bound by our stories of love, loss, and the search for redemption. The 6 numbers on my computer screen swam in a sea of digital blue, a stark contrast to the worn, leather-bound books on the shelves of my study. 7, 14, 23, 31, 42, 49. I checked them against the crumpled ticket in my hand for the 4th time, my thumb tracing the faint ink as if I could somehow feel the truth embedded in the cheap paper. All 6, every single one. The website didn't lie. The official Colorado lottery page, with its flashing graphics and cheerful winner announcements, was as definitive as a positive toxicology screen for cyanide. $20 million. My hands, usually as steady as a surgeon's during an autopsy, were trembling. It was a familiar tremor, one I recognized from crime scenes and from moments of grim discovery. But this was different. This wasn't the chill of finding a victim. It was the electric shock of a future I'd never, ever imagined. In 40 years as a forensic toxicologist, I'd become an expert in the grim finality of things. I'd analyzed cyanide that turned the blood pink, arsenic that left a telltale garlic scent on the breath, heavy metals that slowly shut down organs over years of silent accumulation. I'd testified in court, explaining to juries in plain language how a person's life had been extinguished by a vengeful spouse, a greedy business partner, or a desperate stranger. My world was one of cause and effect, of chemical reactions and irreversible outcomes. It was a world of endings, and now, suddenly, impossibly, I was staring at a beginning. I grabbed my phone, my fingers fumbling slightly as I scrolled to my daughter's contact. Veronica, she was my only child, my anchor in a world that often seemed to be dissolving into chaos. She answered on the first ring, her voice a warm, familiar melody in the quiet of my study. "Dad, what's up?" Is everything okay? She always asked that. A lifetime of my work had left her with a low-level, constant anxiety about my well-being. A quiet fear that one day I'd be on the receiving end of the very poisons I studied. Honey, I'm fine, I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears, tight with an emotion I couldn't yet name. Better than fine, actually. I need to tell you something. I checked my lottery numbers. I paused, letting the weight of the moment settle, not just for me, but for what it would mean for her. Veronica, I won. I won the jackpot. $20 million? There was a beat of silence on the other end, a fraction of a second where my heart seized. Had she heard me? Then came the sound. It started as a gasp, a sharp intake of breath, and then erupted into a full-throated shriek of pure, unadulterated joy that was so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. The shriek melted into laughter, then into what sounded like happy, hysterical sobbing. It was the beautiful, chaotic symphony of a life being instantly, irrevocably changed. Dad, oh my gosh, are you serious? Tell me you're serious. I can't even. $20 million. She finally managed to get out, her voice thick with tears. Are you okay? You're not having a heart attack, are you? I laughed, a real, genuine laugh that felt like it was coming from a much younger man. A warmth spread through my chest, a stark contrast to the cold, clinical detachment that had defined my professional life. For decades, I'd been surrounded by the aftermath of greed and violence. Now, something pure, something wonderful, had landed in my lap. I'm okay, sweetheart. Better than okay. I'm still trying to believe it myself. After we hung up, I sat in the worn leather chair in my study, surrounded by the ghosts of my career. The shelves were lined with textbooks, Principles of Forensic Toxicology, Handbook of Poisonous and Injurious Plants, Clinical Chemistry of Metabolic Disorders. They were my Bibles, my guides through the chemical labyrinths of death. On the walls were framed certificates and photos from crime scenes carefully composed. Of course, devoid of the raw horror, but capturing the essential evidence. 40 years of death, distilled into this one room. And now, life, in the most absurd, lottery ticket form, had come knocking. The doorbell rang the next morning at 9:30 a.m., a sharp, insistent sound that cut through the quiet hum of the house. I wasn't expecting anyone. I peered through the peephole and saw Brian Cole, my son-in-law of 5 years, standing on the porch. He was 39, a pharmacist with a pleasant, unremarkable face that usually wore a friendly smile. But today, something was off. The smile was there, but it was too wide, too bright, his eyes holding a feverish, focused energy that set my teeth on edge. He didn't wait for an invitation, pushing the door open as soon as I unlatched it. "Walt, congratulations," he boomed, striding into the foyer and pumping my hand with a grip that was just a little too firm, a little too enthusiastic. Veronica told me everything. 20 million. That's incredible, man. Absolutely incredible. Thanks, Brian, I said, trying to extricate my hand from his. Can I get you some coffee? No, I'm good, he said, waving off the offer and following me into the living room. He didn't sit. Instead, he began to pace, a slow caged enamel circuit around my coffee table. I noticed his hands, clenching and unclenching at his sides. A classic tell of nervous energy I'd seen in countless interrogations. The physical manifestation of a mind trying to outrun its own lies. So, Walt, he began, stopping his pacing to face me. I've been thinking about this. $20 million. That's a family amount, you know. We're family, and it seems like the fair thing to do would be to split it. Half for you, half for me and Veronica. A fair distribution for the family. I blinked, certain I had misheard him. Excuse me. The money, Walt, he said, his voice losing a bit of its friendly veneer, a harder edge creeping in. You're what, 67? You don't need all that cash. You've got your pension, this house is paid off. But Veronica and I, we've got our whole lives ahead of us. We could buy a house, finally, invest properly, maybe even start a family. It just makes sense for us to think about the future. The cold sensation I'd felt 1,000 times at a crime scene. The prickle on the back of my neck that signaled something was terribly wrong began to creep down my spine. This wasn't the polite, financially responsible son-in-law I thought I knew. This was a stranger, a predator circling, his words a carefully constructed trap. Brian, I said, keeping my voice level, I appreciate your ... forward thinking, but it's my money. I bought the ticket. I'm more than happy to help you and Veronica out, of course, but half, that's not happening. His jaw tightened, the muscles in his cheek twitching. Come on, Walt, be reasonable. You're not going to live forever. What are you going to do with $10 million that you couldn't do with 5? Or even less? It's just ... excessive. That's not the point. Then what is the point? He shot back, his face flushing red. Hoarding money while your own daughter struggles. We live in a cramped one-bedroom apartment, Walt. We're trying to save, but with student loans and the cost of living ... You don't know what our situation is. You don't know what we need. Veronica doesn't struggle, I countered, my own voice hardening now. And you both have good jobs. You're a pharmacist, for God's sake. Brian's face was a dangerous shade of crimson now. You don't know anything, he spat, the mask slipping completely. The man standing in my living room was not the pleasant young man who had married my daughter. This was someone else, someone driven by a desperate, ugly need. We stared at each other, the air thick with tension, and in his eyes, I saw it. The same cold, calculating emptiness I'd seen in the eyes of murderers on the witness stand. The chilling void where empathy should be. He wasn't seeing me as his father-in-law, as a person, as Veronica's father. He was seeing me as an obstacle, a temporary, inconvenient barrier to a fortune. Then, in a voice that was suddenly, chillingly casual, he asked, By the way, Walt, do you have a will? The question hung in the air between us, as toxic and colorless as a nerve agent. A will? Yeah, you know, just in case something happens. At your age, it's important to have your affairs in order. He attempted a smile, but it was a grotesque failure, a grimace that didn't reach his dead, calculating eyes. Who's the beneficiary? Something inside me went very, very still. All my professional instincts, honed by decades of experience, were screaming at full volume. A deafening alarm bell in the quiet of my home. Why do you want to know? Just curious, he said, shrugging a little too quickly. Planning for the future, making sure Veronica's taken care of. That's all. I should have lied. Looking back, with the perfect clarity of hindsight, I should have told him anything but the truth. I should have said it was all going to a charity for retired toxicologists, or to my old university, or that I was planning to spend it all on a collection of vintage cars. But I was still reeling from the audacity of his demand, still trying to reconcile the man I thought I knew with this aggressive, grasping stranger in my living room. My mind, for a moment, failed to connect the dots. "Everything's left to Veronica," I said. And in that moment, for less than a second, Brian's entire expression changed. The forced smile vanished, the feigned warmth evaporated, and his eyes went utterly cold. It was like watching a mask being ripped away, revealing the hard, empty skull beneath. It was a look of pure, reptilian assessment, the look of a man calculating the final solution to a problem. He saw me not as his wife's father, but as a barrier, a temporary one. Then, just as quickly, the smile was back, bright and hollow. "Well, that's good. That's really good, Walt. Veronica's lucky to have a father like you." He left a few minutes later, after another round of insincere congratulations. I stood in my doorway, watching his car disappear down the street, the autumn leaves swirling in its wake. My hands were trembling again, but this time it wasn't from the shock of sudden wealth. It was from the cold, stark realization that I had just looked into the eyes of a man who was planning my death. In 40 years of forensic toxicology, I had learned to read death. I had learned to see murder in the residue of chemicals, in the timing of symptoms, in the desperate, self-serving justifications of people who thought they could get away with it. And I had just seen murder in my son-in-law's eyes. After Brian left, I remained frozen in my living room for what felt like an eternity. The silence of the house was suddenly oppressive, filled with the echoes of his conversation. I walked slowly, deliberately, back to my study, the one place in the world that had always made sense to me, and sank into my desk chair. The photographs on the walls, once a source of quiet pride, now felt like they were mocking me. There was Veronica at 5, gap-toothed and grinning after losing her first tooth. Veronica at 18, proud and beautiful in her high school graduation gown. And Veronica at 30, radiant and full of hope in her wedding dress, with Brian beside her in his tuxedo, both of them beaming, their faces alight with the promise of a happy future. That wedding had been 5 years ago. I remembered so clearly the wave of relief I'd felt when Veronica had introduced me to Brian. Her 20s had been a difficult period, a string of boyfriends who were either unreliable, unkind, or simply directionless. But Brian seemed different. He was educated, articulate, with a stable career as a pharmacist. He spoke respectfully to everyone, helped clear the table after dinner without being asked, and always remembered my birthday. At the wedding reception, he had given a speech that had brought tears to my eyes, vowing to spend his life making Veronica happy, protecting her and cherishing her. I had believed every single word. I had welcomed him into my family, trusted him with my daughter's heart. I picked up a cold coffee mug from my desk, my mind racing, replaying the last few months, searching for the signs I had missed. Of course, there had been signs. There are always signs. I had just ignored them, explained them away, because the truth was too terrible to contemplate. 3 months ago, over a Sunday barbecue, Brian had casually asked about my retirement accounts. "Just curious how you're managing in retirement, Walt," he'd said, flipping a burger on the grill. "The stock market's been crazy, right? Hard to know what to do with your 401k. At the time, I'd thought he was just being thoughtful, making conversation about financial planning. 6 weeks ago, he'd brought up the value of my house. "This area is really appreciating, isn't it?" he'd remarked, looking out my living room window. You must be sitting on a gold mine here. I'd laughed it off, feeling a quiet pride that I'd had the foresight to buy in a good neighborhood decades ago. 2 weeks ago, he'd mentioned estate planning out of the blue. Veronica and I were talking about getting our wills done, he'd said at dinner. Have you updated yours recently, Walt? It's important at your age. At your age? The phrase echoed in my mind now. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a reminder, like I was already ancient, already halfway in the ground. I had written it all off as the responsible behavior of a young man planning for his future. Now, sitting in the silent sanctuary of my study, I saw it for what it was. He hadn't been making conversation. He had been taking inventory. He was assessing assets, calculating liabilities, and determining what my death would be worth. He wasn't planning for a future with me in it. He was planning for a future where my money was his. My phone buzzed on the desk, a text from Veronica. Dad, I'm so excited, I can barely breathe. My students probably think I've completely lost my mind today. Love you so much. My chest tightened with a painful mix of love and fear. She taught English at Jefferson High. She loved her job. She loved her students. She saw the good in everyone. She was good and kind and trusting. To trusting, I thought about Brian's question again. Do you have a will? And my answer, everything's left to Veronica. If I died, she would inherit everything. And Brian, as her husband, would have access to it all. They were married. They had joint accounts, community property. If Veronica inherited $20 million, Brian would have his hands on half of it immediately, and the rest would inevitably follow. I'd worked too many homicide cases to ignore the pattern. Sudden, massive wealth, a clear beneficiary, a suspect with motive, means, and opportunity. Brian was a pharmacist. He had access to a pharmacy's worth of substances that could kill quietly and efficiently. He knew dosages, drug interactions, how to make a death look completely natural. A case from 15 years ago surfaced in my memory with chilling clarity. A wife, a nurse, had been slowly poisoning her husband with digoxin she'd pilfered from her station. Small, carefully measured doses over weeks, mimicking the symptoms of a failing heart. He died of natural causes at 53. We only caught it because his daughter, suspicious of the speed of his decline, had insisted on an autopsy. The toxicology report came back hot for cardiac glycosides. The wife was sentenced to 25 years in prison. My hands were shaking again. I called the Colorado lottery office, my voice firm and decisive. Yes, I'd like to schedule an appointment to claim my prize. How soon can I come in? The woman on the line checked her calendar. Let me see, Mr. Bennett. We have an opening on November 3rd. Does that work? That's perfect, I said. I wanted that money, or at least the lump sum after taxes, in my bank account as soon as humanly possible. If Brian was planning something, I needed to be ready. I needed resources. I needed to be in control. That night, sleep was impossible. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The image of Brian's cold, calculating eyes burned into my mind. $20 million. It was an amount of money so vast it could make a man forget his conscience, if he'd ever had one to begin with. I had spent 40 years analyzing poisons. I knew, in intimate detail, how people killed for money. I had testified in dozens of trials, listened to killers try to justify their actions with a litany of pathetic excuses. I needed it. They were going to die anyway. Nobody was supposed to find out. And now, my own son-in-law was looking at me the same way those killers had looked at their victims, like I was an obstacle, like I was already dead. Asterisk, the irony was so thick I could taste it. I had spent my entire professional life learning how to detect murder. Now, it seemed, I might need those skills to prevent my own. I got out of bed, went back to my study, and opened a fresh notebook. For the next hour, I didn't write about poisons or case files. I made notes about Brian. If he tried something, I would be ready. But I had to be smart. I couldn't accuse him based on a gut feeling and a terrifying look in his eyes. I couldn't destroy my daughter's marriage on instinct alone, no matter how strong that instinct was. I would collect my winnings. I would watch Brian like a hawk. And if he made a move, when he made a move, I would be waiting. Because if there was one thing 40 years of forensic toxicology had taught me, it was this: poisoners, no matter how clever they think they are, always make mistakes. And when Brian made his bird, I would be there to catch him. November 3rd arrived with a crystalline clarity that felt like a personal insult. The kind of sharp, cold morning where Denver's skyline cuts hard edges against a painfully blue sky. I sat in a sterile conference room at the Colorado Lottery office, surrounded by a team of lawyers and financial advisors in expensive suits, all of them explaining my options with the rehearsed enthusiasm of salesmen at a high-end car dealership. "Mr. Bennett, you have two primary choices," the lead attorney said, sliding a thick stack of documents across the polished mahogany table. "Option 1, the lump sum. After federal and state taxes, you're looking at approximately $11.5 million deposited into your account within 5 business days. Option 2, the annuity. The full $20 million paid out over 30 years in annual installments." I didn't hesitate for a second. "Lump sum, are you certain, sir?" He pressed. "The annuity provides long-term security and a significant tax advantage. It's often the wiser choice for individuals who aren't experienced wealth managers." "I'm 67 years old," I interrupted, my tone leaving no room for debate. "I want control of my money now, not promises spread across 3 decades I might not live to see." The unspoken part, the part I couldn't say in a room full of strangers, was that I needed liquid assets immediately. If Brian was planning what I suspected he was planning, I needed resources. I needed mobility. I needed to be ready for anything. 3 hours of signatures, identity verifications, and mind-numbing legal formalities later. I walked out of that office holding a cashier's check for $11,500,000. The number was absurd, surreal. Even after taxes, even after losing almost half the jackpot to the government's cut, it was more money than I had earned in my entire 40-year career. I sat in my car in the parking garage, the check resting on the passenger seat like a winning lottery ticket from a different, more glamorous life. My hands weren't shaking this time. They were steady, focused, because somewhere in the back of my mind, a clock was ticking. Brian knew I'd be collecting the money soon. Brian was making his own plans. That evening, I called Veronica. She answered on the first ring, her voice breathless with anticipation. "Dad, did you get it? Is it official?" "It's official, honey," I confirmed, a smile touching my lips for the first time all day. $11.5 million in the bank by Friday. She screamed into the phone, and I had to hold it away from my ear again, grinning despite the dark cloud that hung over my happiness. "Oh my gosh, Dad, this is real. This is actually really real." It is. And I want to celebrate properly. Tomorrow night, 7 o'clock, La Mesa Dorado. You and Brian, dress up nice. We're doing this right, La Mesa Dorado. Dad, that place is insanely expensive. I looked at their menu online once. A steak costs more than my weekly grocery bill. Honey, I just won the lottery, I said gently. I think we can afford one fancy dinner. I paused, listening carefully. In the background, I heard her relay the news. Baby, tomorrow night, Dad got the money. We're going to La Mesa Dorado. Brian's response was muffled, indistinct, but there was something in the tone, a flat, calculating quality that made my jaw tighten. After we hung up, I made another call. La Mesa Dorado answered on the third ring. Yes, I'd like to reserve your best private dining room for tomorrow evening. 7 o'clock. 3 people. Money is no object. I want champagne, crystal, if you have it, and your finest menu items. This is a celebration. The hostess on the other end, clearly accustomed to dealing with wealthy clients, didn't skip a beat. Of course, sir. We'll prepare everything to your specifications. May I ask the occasion? Lottery winnings, I said, and it felt good to say it out loud, to claim that victory, to stake my claim on this new, strange life. Congratulations, Mr. Bennett. We'll make it a truly memorable evening. That night, lying in bed, sleep once again eluded me. My mind kept circling back to Brian's visit, his questions about the will, that cold, reptilian calculation in his eyes. I had worked enough murder cases to recognize the pattern with chilling clarity. Sudden wealth, a clear beneficiary, a suspect with motive, means, and opportunity. The pharmaceutical knowledge, the access to drugs, the desperate need for money that I hadn't even known about until he'd mentioned those debts so casually, so bitterly. I got up, went to my study, and did something I should have done months ago. I opened my laptop and started digging. I searched for Brian Cole, his social media profiles, public records, anything I could find. His Facebook page was a carefully curated museum of normalcy. Photos of him and Veronica at restaurants, hiking in the mountains, smiling for the camera with friends. The life of a typical, happy pharmacist. But when I dug deeper, using the professional databases and contacts I still had from my career, a much darker picture began to emerge. 3 months ago, a civil complaint had been filed against him by a credit card company. It had been dismissed, but the initial claim was for $18,000 in unpaid debts. 2 months ago, another one, this time for $12,000 from a different creditor. Also dismissed, but the pattern was undeniable. Brian had money problems, serious ones. I sat back in my chair, the blue light of the laptop screen illuminating the worried lines on my face. How had Veronica not known? Had he hidden it from her, or had she known and not told me, trying to protect her husband's dignity? The clock on my desk read 2:47 a.m. in 17 hours. I would be sitting across from my son-in-law at the most expensive restaurant in Denver, celebrating a fortune that he had already decided should be his. I checked the locks on my doors one more time before going back to bed. Old habits from a lifetime of studying how people killed each other. The quiet paranoia of someone who knew exactly how easy it was to poison a man and make it look like natural causes. Because Brian was a pharmacist, and I was a forensic toxicologist. We both knew the same dark secrets about chemistry and death. The difference was, I had spent 40 years learning how to catch killers, and he was about to become one. November 4th, 7 p.m. La Mesa Dorado lived up to its name. The golden table. The lighting was warm and golden, making everything glow as if we'd stepped into an old master painting. Our private dining room, a secluded alcove with a panoramic view of downtown Denver, overlooked the city spreading out below us in a breathtaking carpet of lights. Veronica looked stunning in a navy blue dress I'd never seen before, her hair styled, her makeup perfect. She was vibrating with a barely contained excitement, unable to sit still. Brian wore a charcoal suit and tie, his smile plastered on his face like a cheap Halloween mask, too wide, too fixed, never quite reaching his eyes. The waiter, a young man with impeccable posture, presented the champagne with the reverence of a high priest. Crystal, Sir 2012 vintage. I nodded, and he poured 3 glasses with practiced precision. I raised mine, the crystal catching the light. To family, I said, my eyes on Brian, to the future. 2 unexpected gifts from fate. We clinked glasses. Veronica's eyes were shining. Dad, I can't believe this is real. You won the lottery. You actually, really won it. Believe it, honey. So, what are you going to do with it? She asked, leaning forward, her dreams spilling out. Travel, buy a new house. You could get that place by the lake you always talked about. Maybe, I said, watching Brian over the rim of my glass. He was smiling, but his eyes kept flicking to me, assessing, calculating, his mind clearly worry. I want to help you too, out of course. Make sure you're set up properly. Brian's smile widened. That's generous, Walt. Really generous. Something in his tone made my skin crawl, like he was humoring an old man, playing along with my little fantasy of control. The waiter returned. Are we ready to order? We ordered ribeye steaks for all 3 of us, lobster tails, truffle risotto on the side, the kind of meal that would have cost me a week's salary back when I was working. Now, it barely registered as an expense. While we waited for the food, Veronica launched into her dreams. Europe next summer, maybe Paris, definitely Rome. She'd always wanted to see the Colosseum. Perhaps they could finally buy a house instead of renting that cramped apartment in Capitol Hill. I watched Brian watch her. His expression was tender, loving even. But I'd spent too many years reading people who lied under oath to miss the calculation beneath the affection. He was doing math in his head, dividing assets, planning expenditures. Excuse me, Veronica said suddenly, standing up. I need to fix my makeup. Be right back. Brian stood as well. I'll use the restroom, too. They left together, and I was alone in the private dining room with the city lights and my dark thoughts. That's when everything changed. A man in chef's whites approached my table, his face pale, his hands trembling. His name tag read Juan Martinez. He glanced over his shoulder nervously, then leaned in close, his voice barely above a whisper. Senna, forgive me for interrupting. Is something wrong with the order? No, Senna. I need to show you something. It's very important. He pulled a small glass vial from his pocket, maybe 2 inches tall, filled with a clear, innocuous-looking liquid. His hands shook as he held it. 2 days ago, a man came to me. He offered me $5,000 cash. He wanted me to put this in your food tonight. My heart stopped. Actually stopped. For one long, terrifying second, the world went silent and still. Who? The word came out hoarse, barely a whisper. Juan pulled out his phone, found a photo. Security camera footage. grainy, but clear enough. Brian standing by the service entrance, handing Juan an envelope. My son-in-law, the man who had married my daughter, the man who had promised to cherish and protect her. He had paid a chef $5,000 to poison me. He said it was just sleeping medicine. Juan continued, his voice breaking. Said you forgot to take your pills and he wanted to help. But Senna, I worked in a hospital in Mexico. I know what medicine looks like. This, he gestured to the vial. This is something else. Something dangerous. I took the vial carefully, unscrewed the cap just slightly, and inhaled. 40 years of training kicked in instantly. The faint, bitter almond scent mixed with something chemical. Not sleeping pills. Not even close. This was a glycoside mixture, probably diazepam, for sedation combined with oleander extract for cardiac arrest. 4 to 6 hours after ingestion, it would cause a fatal arrhythmia and heart attack. To any emergency room doctor, a 67-year-old man dying of a heart attack after a heavy meal and champagne would look completely natural. Professional work for a pharmacist. Juan, I said quietly, my voice like ice, why are you telling me this? He met my eyes, and I saw genuine anguish there. Ya ve tú, children, señor. I need money. My mother needs surgery in Mexico. But I cannot. I cannot kill a man. I'm not a murderer. You did the right thing, I said, my voice steady, but inside I was cold. Not afraid, cold. How long until they come back? 2. Maybe 3 minutes. 2 minutes. I had 2 minutes to decide how to handle the fact that my son-in-law had just tried to murder me for $11.5 million. And in that moment, sitting in that golden dining room holding the poison meant to kill me, I made my decision. Brian thought he was the hunter. He thought I was just an old man, an easy target, an obstacle between him and a fortune. He'd forgotten what I did for 40 years. I didn't just analyze poisons. I caught the people who used them. And Brian Cole had just made the biggest mistake of his life. I held the vial carefully, turning it in the light. The liquid was clear, almost water-like, but the faint chemical smell told me everything I needed to know. 40 years of analyzing poisons had trained my nose better than any machine. One, I said quietly, I need you to be very clear with me. This man, I gestured to the security photo on his phone. Brian's face sharp and unmistakable. He gave you this 2 days ago. Yes, señor. Wednesday afternoon, he met me at the service entrance. Juan's hands were still shaking. He said it was medicine for your heart, that you forget to take it sometimes. I almost laughed. Almost. Brian had actually thought he could convince a chef that this cocktail of diazepam and oleander extract was heart medication. The arrogance was breathtaking. And he offered you $5,000 cash. He showed it to me. Said I'd get it tonight after. After you. One couldn't finish the sentence. After I died. After the poison-induced cardiac arrhythmia 4 to 6 hours from now. After the paramedics found me collapsed in my home. After the coroner ruled it a heart attack. Tragic, but expected in a 67-year-old man who'd just eaten a rich meal and drunk champagne. Professional, calculated, and it would have worked on anyone who wasn't a forensic toxicologist. One, you have 2 children, you said. Yes, señor. A boy and a girl. They're 12 and 14, and your mother needs surgery. His eyes widened. How did you, because you wouldn't have considered this for any other reason. You're not a killer. I stood up, pocketing the vial carefully. Here's what's going to happen. In about 90 seconds, my daughter and her husband are going to come back from the restrooms. You're going to bring out the main courses, 3 ribeye steaks, perfectly cooked, and you're going to act like nothing happened. Can you do that? But Senna, what about leave that to me? I said, my voice leaving no room for argument. I met his eyes. Trust me, Juan, this is what I do. I catch poisoners. I've been catching them for 40 years. He stared at me for a moment, then nodded slowly. What about the money? For my mother. I almost smiled. Even now, in the middle of this nightmare, he was thinking about his mother. You'll have it. Not from Brian, from me. $10,000. Consider it payment for your honesty. But first, I need you to do exactly what I say. His face transformed. Senna, I don't know what to. Just bring the steaks, I said, my tone softening slightly. I waited until he met my eyes. When the police come and they will come, you tell them everything. The truth. All of it. I'll make sure you're protected. He nodded and hurried back toward the kitchen. I sat down, my heart pounding, but my hands steady. The vial felt heavy in my jacket pocket. Evidence. Beautiful, damning evidence. I looked at the table setting. 3 places. 3 small porcelain sauce dishes positioned beside each plate. Brian always drowns everything in sauce. I'd watched him do it 100 times. Steak, chicken, even fish. He thinks it's sophisticated, adding sauce to everything. Tonight, that habit was going to save my life and end his. The plan formed in my mind with crystalline clarity. It wasn't revenge. Not really. It was justice. The same kind of justice I'd spent for decades pursuing. Brian had tried to kill me for money, had paid someone to poison me, had looked at me across the dinner table, knowing I'd be dead by morning, probably already planning how he'd console Veronica through her grief. The cold rage I felt wasn't hot or explosive. It was ice, pure, calculated ice. I heard footsteps, Veronica's heels clicking on the marble floor, Brian's dress shoes following. I arranged my face into a pleasant expression, the mask of a man celebrating his good fortune. Dad, sorry about that. Veronica slid back into her seat, still glowing. The line for the ladies' room was insane. No problem. Honey, I watched Brian sit down, watched his eyes flick to my plate, then to the sauce dish beside it, checking, calculating, wondering if one had already added the poison to my food. The anticipation in his eyes made me want to vomit, but instead I smiled. The food should be out any minute. I'm starving, aren't you? Brian's smile didn't reach his eyes. Absolutely. This place is supposed to be incredible, worth every penny, I agreed and thought. You're about to find out just how much. Kuwan emerged from the kitchen with 2 other servers, all carrying large plates. 3 massive ribeye steaks, perfectly seared, accompanied by roasted vegetables and truffle mashed potatoes. The aroma was incredible, rich, savory, exactly the kind of meal that would make poison impossible to detect by taste. They set the plates down with practiced precision. One wouldn't meet my eyes, but his hands were steadier now. Good, he was going to be okay. This looks amazing, Veronica said, picking up her knife and fork. Brian reached for his sauce dish, the small porcelain boat filled with red wine reduction. His fingers closed around it, and I made my move. I'd been holding the vial in my jacket pocket, waiting for exactly this moment. while Veronica was admiring her steak, and Brian was reaching for his sauce. I smoothly pulled out the vial and, in one fluid motion that took less than 3 seconds, emptied its entire contents into Brian's sauce dish. The poison slipped in silently, invisibly, mixing with the red wine reduction like it had always belonged there. I pocketed the empty vial and sat back, my heart hammering, but my face completely calm. Professional, clean, exactly the way Brian had planned to do it to me. Brian lifted the sauce dish, tilting it over his steak. The mixture poured out in a dark stream, coating the meat, pooling round the vegetables. He set the dish down and picked up his knife and fork. "Brian, wait." My voice was quiet, almost gentle, but something in the tone made him freeze, the fork halfway to his mouth. "What?" His voice had an edge to it. Nervousness, like he knew somewhere deep in his criminal little brain that something was wrong. I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "I just wanted to thank you for the special ingredient you added to tonight's dinner." The color drained from his face so fast I thought he might pass out, from healthy pink to corpse gray in about 2 seconds flat. His mouth opened, closed, opened again, exactly like a fish drowning in air. The fork clattered onto his plate. "Dad," Veronica was looking between us, confused. "What are you talking about?" I kept my eyes on Brian. "Tell me, son, what's $5,000 worth these days? Is that the going rate for murder? Or did you get a discount because Juan has a family to feed?" Brian's hands started trembling, actually trembling, like he had Parkinson's. "Walt, I don't know what you don't." The word came out sharp as a scalpel. I pulled the empty vial from my pocket and set it on the table between us. The glass caught the light. The chef told me everything. How you approached him Wednesday. How you offered him $5,000 cash. How you gave him this. I tapped the vial and told him to put it in my food. "Dad, this is crazy," Veronica started. "Look at him, honey. Really look at him." She did. And even she, loving and trusting as she was, couldn't miss the guilt written all over Brian's face. The way his skin had gone clammy, the way his hands wouldn't stop shaking, the way he couldn't meet her eyes. "Brian," her voice was very small. "Tell me this isn't true. Tell me you didn't." I can explain," his voice cracked. "It's not what it looks like, really." I leaned forward. "Because it looks like attempted murder. It looks like you tried to poison me for $11.5 million. It looks like you were willing to orphan my daughter for money." "You don't understand." The words burst out of him, desperate and raw. "I have debts. Almost $200,000 in debts. They're going to kill me if I don't pay." There it was. The confession. The motive laid bare. Veronica made a sound like she'd been punched. "So you decided to kill me instead." I kept my voice level. "That was your solution. Murder your father and cash in on your wife's inheritance." I didn't think. I wasn't thinking clearly. He was spiraling now, the words tumbling out. "I'm sorry, Walt. I'm so sorry. Sorry you tried, or sorry you got caught." He didn't answer. Couldn't answer. I looked down at his plate, at the perfectly cooked steak swimming in sauce. Sauce now laced with the exact same poison he'd intended for me. There's something poetic about this, don't you think? That sauce you just poured all over your dinner. That's where the poison is now. Every drop of it. The same poison you wanted me to eat. His face did something extraordinary. It went from grey to green, his eyes bulging as the realization hit him. He shoved his chair back so hard it toppled over, the crash echoing through the private dining room. You put it in my food. Are you insane? Am I? I tilted my head, genuinely curious. Because from where I'm sitting, you tried to murder me first. I just returned the favor. Call it a social experiment. How does it feel, Brian, knowing you're about to eat the poison you mixed with your own hands? He was hyperventilating now, backing away from the table like it might explode. This is... You can't. I'll call the police. I'll tell them you tried to poison me. Please do. I pulled out my phone. I have the chef's testimony, the security camera footage of you handing him an envelope, your fingerprints all over the vial, and I smiled. I still have the empty vial as evidence, but by all means, let's call the police. I'm sure they'll be fascinated to hear how this all started. Veronica was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. Brian looked at her, at me, at the poisoned steak, and I watched him break. Completely, utterly break. Wait, Brian's voice came out strangled. He held up his hands like a man surrendering. Just wait. Let me explain. Explain. I kept my voice level. Explain how you tried to murder me. I'm listening. Veronica was frozen, her face a mask of shock. She looked between us, unable to process what was happening. Brian ran his hands through his hair. They were shaking. Walt, you have to understand. I'm desperate. I owe people. Dangerous people. Almost $200,000 in online gambling, sports betting. They've threatened me. Said if I don't pay by December 1st, they'll hurt Veronica. So naturally, you decided to murder me instead. I leaned back, studying him like a specimen under a microscope. Tell me, did you think about Veronica at all? About what finding her father dead would do to her? Of course I thought about her. That's why I had to do it, to protect her. I laughed. The sound was cold and bitter. You're not protecting anyone, Brian. You're protecting yourself. You have gambling debts. So you decided the easiest solution was to murder your father-in-law and collect his money. That's not protection. That's premeditated murder. Dad, Veronica's voice was tiny. Is this real? I pulled the empty vial from my pocket and set it on the table. The glass caught the light. This is very real, honey. 2 days ago, your husband paid our chef $5,000 to put this poison in my food. Diazepam mixed with oleander extract. Cardiac glycosides that would have stopped my heart within 6 hours. Natural-looking heart attack. I turned to Brian. Professional work. Mixed it yourself at the pharmacy, didn't you? His silence was answer enough. But here's what you didn't count on. One has 2 children, a mother who needs surgery. Despite needing that $5,000 desperately, he has more conscience than you have in your entire body. He came to me, told me everything, showed me the security footage of you handing him the envelope. Brian's face cycled through emotions: denial, rage, fear, panic. He settled on desperate pleading. I'll give it back. The poison. I'll go to the police myself. I'll confess. Just please, don't tell Veronica. She doesn't need to know what my husband tried to murder my father. Veronica's voice cut through his babbling like a knife. She stood up, and I saw something I'd never seen before. Pure fury. That you have $200,000 in gambling debts you never told me about. That you were going to let me find Dad dead while knowing you killed him. Veronica, please, He tried to reach for her, but she jerked away. How long? She stepped toward him, and he backed up. How long have you been gambling? 3 years. The confession came out broken. Started small. Sports betting, then casinos. I kept thinking I could win it back. 3 years, she said it like tasting poison. For more than half our marriage, you've been lying, stealing, and planning to murder my father. I wasn't. I didn't want to. I was backed into a corner. These people will kill me if I don't pay. Then let them. The words exploded out of her, and even I flinched. Let them do whatever they want, because right now I don't care. I don't care if you're in danger. All I care about is that you tried to kill my father. Brian turned to me, eyes wild. Walt, please. I'll do anything. Sign a confession. Testify against the people I owe. Just give me a chance. Fix this. I stood slowly. You can't fix attempted murder, Brian. You can't undo the moment you decided my life was worth less than your gambling debts. But I didn't actually do it. The poison never went in your food, so technically nothing happened. I smiled. Not pleasant. Except you bought the poison, mixed it, paid $5,000, gave explicit instructions. In Colorado, that's attempted murder in the first degree. The fact that one had a conscience doesn't make you innocent. It makes you incompetent. His face went from red to white. You can't prove I have the vial with your fingerprints. One's testimony, security footage, the $5,000 withdrawal from your bank 2 days ago. I ticked off each point. And now I have your confession, witnessed by your wife and recorded on my phone. His eyes dropped to my jacket pocket where my phone sat, screen up, recording light blinking. You recorded this. Every word. I stopped the recording and pocketed it. 40 years as a forensic toxicologist taught me one thing. Poisoners think they're clever, but they always make mistakes. What mistake? His voice was barely audible. I leaned in. You tried to poison a toxicologist, someone who spent his career learning how people like you operate. Did you really think I wouldn't recognize bitter almonds? Wouldn't know diazepam from aspirin? The words hit him like blows. His shoulders slumped. Attempted murder doesn't care if you succeeded, I said. You planned it. You executed steps toward it. That's a Class 2 felony in Colorado. 8 to 48 years in prison. 48 years. He repeated numbly. I'll be 87 if you get out. Good behavior might help. But with your gambling debts, your lies, your lack of remorse, I shook my head. Don't count on leniency. Asterisk, he sank down back against the wall, looking up at me with destroyed eyes. What do you want? He whispered. Money. I don't want anything from you. What I want is justice. For you to face the consequences of trying to murder me for $11 million. Please. Tears ran down his face. I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But I can change. Get help. Gamblers Anonymous. Therapy, just don't. Don't turn me in. I looked at him with something approaching pity. You had 3 years to get help. Instead, you stole, lied, and when you ran out of options, decided murder was easier than honesty. I started dialing. You're done getting chances. The phone rang once, twice. Detective Hamilton. Roger. It's Walt Bennett. I need you at La Mesa Dorado downtown. I have an attempted murder for you. Brian's face went from white to grey, the color of death. The plate crashed to the floor. Brian had shoved his chair back so hard it toppled, sending his poisoned steak sliding across marble in a spreading pool of red wine sauce. People at nearby tables turned to stare. "Is everything all right?" A waiter hurried over, concerned. "Fine," I said smoothly. "Just an accident. My son-in-law is feeling unwell." Brian's face was concrete grey. Sweat soaked his shirt. "You put the poison in my food." I returned what you tried to give me. Think of it as a gift exchange." I kept my voice level. "You were thoughtful enough to plan my death. I wanted to show my appreciation." "Dad," Veronica's voice shook. "Did you actually?" "The poison is in the sauce, now all over the floor. No one is in danger." I gestured to the mess. "Except Brian's pride." Brian backed away from the spreading steak and poison. "This is insane. You're threatening me." "You admitted to what?" "Putting your own poison back where you could see it." "I didn't force you to eat it. I simply wanted you to understand what it feels like. That moment when you realize someone wants you dead." I straightened my jacket. "How does it feel, Brian?" "That terror?" He couldn't answer. His mouth opened and closed silently. "I need to leave." Veronica grabbed her purse. "I can't be here. I can't." "Honey," I reached for her. "No, Dad. I need to think." Tears streamed down her face. "My husband tried to kill you. You almost killed him back. I need air." She fled. I heard her heels clicking rapidly, then the door opening and closing. Brian and I stood alone in the wreckage. The crystal champagne, expensive steaks, city lights. It all seemed obscene now. "You've destroyed my life," Brian said finally. His voice was dead. "Veronica will never forgive me, and you're sending me to prison." "No, Brian. You destroyed your own life when you decided to become a murderer." "I'm just the person who stopped you," he laughed. "Horrible, broken. You think you're the hero. You put poison in my food, threatened me, recorded me without consent. Colorado is a two-party consent state, Walt. Your evidence is inadmissible." I smiled. He'd done his homework. Except we're in a public restaurant, not a private space. Different rules. Also, I showed him my phone screen. "I verbally informed you I was recording 2 minutes ago. You looked right at it. That's consent." His face crumbled. "Please, I'm begging. I'll leave Veronica, disappear, sign divorce papers. Just let this go." "Can't do that," I signaled the waiter. "The gentleman will be staying to speak with police." Brian's eyes went wide. "You called the police?" "One called them 20 minutes ago while you were in the restroom. They should be here any minute." Sirens outside. Brian heard them, too. He turned toward the exit, but 2 Denver police officers were already coming through the door, led by Detective Roger Hamilton. "Walt." Roger nodded, then looked at Brian. "This, the guy." "Brian Cole, 39, attempted murder by poisoning." I pulled out the sealed vial. Evidence, his fingerprints all over it. Contents are diazepam and oleander extract. Roger took the bag. Witness: Chef Juan Martinez in the kitchen. Security footage from 2 days ago showing Brian at the service entrance. Brian was shaking his head, backing away. "This is entrapment. He set me up. He put poison in my food. The poison that you provided, Roger asked mildly. That you paid someone to put in his food first. Aye, that's enough. Brian Cole. Roger pulled out handcuffs. You're under arrest for attempted murder in the first degree. You have the right to remain silent. I watched Brian's face as Roger read his rights. Watched the exact moment he realized he wasn't talking his way out. When the reality of prison sank in, his legs gave out. Roger's partner caught him. I can't go to prison, Brian said, voice breaking. Those people I owe, they have contacts inside. They'll kill me. Should have thought of that before. Roger snapped the handcuffs on. Come on. As they led Brian away, he looked back one last time. His face was destroyed. All charm, all manipulation, gone. What remained was just a terrified man who'd gambled everything and lost. I'm sorry, he said. I'm so sorry, Walt. I didn't respond, just watched as they took him away. One emerged from the kitchen, nervous. Sinar Bennett. The police need my statement. Go ahead. Tell them everything. Truthfully, you're protected. I pulled an envelope from my pocket. And Juan, this is for your mother's surgery. $10,000, like I promised. His eyes filled with tears. Senna, I don't. You saved my life by being honest. That's worth every penny. I shook his hand. You're going to be fine. Outside, I found Veronica on a bench, hugging herself in the cold November air. I draped my jacket around her shoulders. He's gone, I said quietly. The police have him. She didn't respond for a long time. I loved him, Dad. I really loved him. I know. How did I not see it? Because he didn't want you to. People like Brian hide what they are until they can't. What happens now? Now I make sure he goes to prison for a very long time. I put my arm around her, and you heal. However long that takes. She leaned her head on my shoulder. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry. You have nothing to apologize for. Nothing. I held her close. Come on, let's go home. The next morning, I drove to my old laboratory, the place where I'd spent 40 years analyzing death. Walking through those doors felt different now. I wasn't there to solve someone else's murder. I was there to prove my own attempted one. Marcus Chen met me in the lobby. We'd worked together for 20 years before I retired. When he saw the sealed evidence bag, his expression went from friendly to professional instantly. Walt, what do you have? Full toxicology workup. Official documented chain of custody. Criminal case. He took the bag carefully. What am I looking at? Diazepam mixed with oleander extract. Cardiac glycoside. Attempted murder by poisoning. His eyebrows shot up. Who's the victim? Mi Jesus. Wouch. He studied the vial. Who tried to kill you? My son. For $11.5 million. Marcus whistled. Lottery winner gets targeted. Classic how'd you catch it? The chef he bribed had a conscience, I explained quickly. The restaurant, Juan, the confession, the arrest. I'll have full analysis in 48 hours. Report will be bulletproof. He paused. I'm sorry, Walt. Just make the case airtight. From the lab, I went to Denver Police Headquarters. Roger Hamilton was waiting, his desk covered in the organized chaos of case files. Hell of a night, he said. Hell of a life. I sat down. Where are we? Roger pulled out a thick file. Brian Cole, 39, pharmacist. Attempted murder, first degree. Evidence is strong. Juan's statement is solid. Security footage is clear. The vial has Cole's prints. Financial records show the $5,000 withdrawal and $195,000 in gambling debts. He looked up. But why didn't you come to us immediately? Because I wanted him to confess in front of witnesses. On recording, I wanted his words to convict him, and I wanted my daughter to hear the truth from his mouth, not police reports. Roger nodded. Risky, effective. Dar wants trial in 2 weeks. Good, keep him locked up. He's a flight risk with those debts. Before leaving, I made one more stop. Lester Fields, criminal attorney, the best in Denver. Not a friend. I'd never met him, but the professional I needed. Lester was 61, silver-haired, expensive suit. His office overlooked downtown, all glass and money. Mr. Bennett, he gestured to a chair. Roger speaks highly of you. Let's talk about putting your son-in-law away for 30 years. We spent 2 hours on every piece of evidence, every possible defense argument, every way Brian's attorney might create reasonable doubt. In Colorado, attempted murder by poison carries serious weight, Lester said. 8 to 48 years. With gambling debts establishing motive, security footage and one's testimony establishing means and opportunity, and Brian's recorded confession establishing intent. He leaned back. Minimum 25 years, possibly more. Make it more. That's the spirit, he grinned. His lawyer will try to paint you as the villain. Old man with millions, refusing to help struggling son-in-law, driving him to desperate measures. They'll try for jury sympathy. Then we make sure the jury understands he wasn't asking for help. He was planning murder. Oh, he will regret everything. Lester walked me to the door. By the time this trial is over, Brian Cole will wish he'd never heard of the Colorado lottery. That evening, I sat with Veronica on my porch. She'd moved back home. Couldn't face their apartment. She'd already called a divorce attorney. Papers would be filed within days. What happens at trial? She asked quietly. He'll be convicted. The evidence is overwhelming. And then, prison for a very long time. And you heal. She was quiet. Do you think he ever loved me? I think he loved what you represented. Security, access to money through me. I looked at her. But the man who loved you wouldn't have tried to murder your father. She nodded, tears sliding down. I was so stupid. No, you were trusting. There's a difference. I put my arm around her. You're stronger than you know. Asterisk above us, stars were coming out, constant, unchanging, like justice if you waited long enough. 2 weeks later, we'd find out if I was right. The courtroom was packed. Media had caught wind. Lottery winner nearly poisoned by son-in-law, and reporters filled the gallery along with Brian's shell-shocked family. I sat front row with Veronica. She wore all black, like attending a funeral. The death of her marriage. The death of who she thought she'd married. Brian sat at the defense table with Sean Dennis. Expensive, aggressive. Brian had lost weight in 2 weeks in jail. Gaunt face, hollow eyes. He didn't look at us. The prosecution called Marcus first. Dr. Chen, explain what you found in your analysis. Marcus opened his report. The vial contained 15 milligrams of diazepam mixed with concentrated nerium oleander extract. The oleander contains cardiac glycosides, causing arrhythmia and cardiac arrest. In layman's terms, a 2-stage poison. Diazepam sedate. Oleander causes heart failure. In a 67-year-old man, after a heavy meal, death would appear natural. Very difficult to detect without specific toxicology screening. Could an ordinary person create this? No, this requires pharmaceutical knowledge, drug interactions, proper dosing, extraction techniques. Marcus looked at Brian. Someone with medical or pharmaceutical training. Objection. Speculation. Sean jumped up. Sustained, but the damage was done. Everyone knew Brian was a pharmacist. One testified next. Nervous, but clear. Brian approaching him. $5,000. My photo, the vial. Did the defendant tell you what was in the vial? He said medicine for Mr. Bennett's heart. But you didn't believe him. No, I worked in a hospital. I know medicine. That was something else. The security footage played, clear as day. Brian handing Juan an envelope. Timestamp, November 2nd, 2:47 p.m. Detective. Hamilton testified about the financial investigation. $5,000 withdrawal. Gambling debts. Offshore betting. Threatening emails. Then they played my recording. The courtroom went silent as Brian's voice filled the space. I have debts. Almost $200,000. They'll kill me. You have nobody but her. That money would have gone to Veronica anyway. I just accelerated it. I watched the jury. Watched their faces shift from neutral to disgusted. Watched them look at Brian like something that crawled from under a rock. Brian took the stand. Biggest mistake. Sean tried to paint him as desperate, driven by circumstances, but under cross-examination, Brian fell apart. Mr. Cole, when did you learn about Mr. Bennett's lottery winnings? October 28th. And when did you withdraw $5,000? November 2nd. 4 days later. For days to plan murder. I wasn't thinking clearly. You mixed pharmaceutical poison. That requires thought, planning, knowledge. You didn't panic. You calculated. You premeditated. You chose murder. Brian's face crumbled. I was scared. They were going to hurt Veronica, so you decided to orphan her instead. Murder her father. Let her find his body. Comfort her through grief. All while knowing you'd killed him. He had no answer. Just sat there broken while the prosecutor dismantled every excuse. The jury deliberated 3 hours. When they returned, the forewoman stood. In the case of the people versus Brian Cole, on the charge of attempted murder in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty. Brian's face went white. His mother sobbed. Sean closed his eyes. Sentencing came 2 days later. The judge was stern. Mr. Cole, you planned and attempted to execute the murder of your father-in-law for financial gain. You manipulated someone desperate to carry out your crime. You betrayed your wife, your family, and every principle of human decency. This court sentences you to 28 years in state prison without possibility of parole for 20 years. 28 years. Brian would be 67 when he got out, my age now, if he got out. As they led him away in handcuffs, he looked at Veronica. I'm sorry, Veronica. I love you. She turned her face away, wouldn't even look. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, but I pushed through to the parking lot. Veronica and I drove home in silence. That evening, we sat on my porch, same place as before. Sun setting, painting the sky orange and purple. How did you stay so calm through all of it? She asked. 40 years working with evidence. I learned to trust facts over emotions. Emotions cloud judgment. Facts tell truth. She was quiet. You won $20 million and lost a son-in-law. I lost a husband. This is victory, but it tastes bitter. I put my arm around her. That's the price of justice sometimes. It doesn't erase pain. It just ensures the guilty face consequences. Will I ever trust anyone again? Yes, because you're not broken. You were lied to. That's not your fault. I looked at her. You'll heal. You'll be careful, but you'll love again. My phone buzzed. Message from Marcus. Cleanest evidence work I've seen in 40 years. You've still got it, old man. I smiled, texted back. Thanks for the assist. Veronica leaned her head on my shoulder. We sat as the sun disappeared and stars came out. The lottery money was in the bank. Brian was in prison. Veronica was safe. Justice had been served, but she was right. It tasted bitter. Victory always does when it costs you family. That's the price of truth, the cost of justice, and sometimes the weight of $20 million. The subsequent decades unfolded like a meticulously composed symphony. Each year a movement, each challenge a note, each triumph and failure a cadence contributing to the resonance of her life. By the 21st year, the subtle architecture of her character had become both visible and invisible, visible in the way she moved through the world, with quiet authority, invisible in the threads of thought, moral calibration, and emotional awareness that guided every interaction. Each morning began not with anxiety or compulsion, but with a ritual of reflection reviewing the previous day, observing the outcomes of actions, contemplating choices yet to come, and realigning her intentions with the highest principles she had cultivated. The vineyard itself had become a living mirror of her internal evolution, where once she had seen the vines as obstacles, as laborious punishment for past mistakes, she now saw them as partners in dialogue. She could read the subtle curl of a leaf, the shift of soil texture, the faint whisper of a breeze through the rose as messages from the land itself. Each vine's growth, each unexpected bloom, each minor setback or disease outbreak became a lesson in observation, patience, and adaptation. She had learned that life, like the vineyard, rewards those who notice patterns, respect rhythms, and respond with skill rather than force. The parallels to human relationships were unmistakable. Empathy, patience, attentiveness, and measured action cultivated resilience and deep connection by the 25th year. Her capacity for self-regulation had become extraordinary. The reflexive impulses of pride, anger, or fear, which once dictated her every move, had transformed into sources of insight. When confronted with provocation, she could recognize the initial surge of reactive energy and observe it as a phenomenon rather than an imperative. She had trained herself to interrogate the origin of every emotion. Is this rooted in reality, or is it the echo of old wounds? Is it useful, or is it a distortion of perception? These questions became second nature. Her anger, once destructive, now served as a signal for boundaries. Her fear, once paralytic, became a guide for caution and preparation. Her pride, once blinding, was now a tool for discernment, highlighting areas of competence and areas demanding humility. Asterisk. The years that followed deepened her understanding of time itself as a teacher. She began to perceive life not as a series of discrete events, but as a continuous flow of causality, where even the smallest gestures or decisions rippled outward in ways she could not immediately see. The The subtle effect of a kind word to a struggling colleague, the patience extended to a trainee. The restraint shown in negotiational were understood as forms of compounding influence. She came to understand that while external success could be sudden and dramatic, internal mastery accrued slowly, almost imperceptibly, and that the greatest victories were those that grew quietly, unnoticed by the world, but enduring in impact. By the 30th year, she had achieved a remarkable synthesis of ambition and humility. She could act decisively in the world, pursue complex ventures, and exert influence without ever losing sight of ethical alignment or emotional resonance. Her decisions were informed by both strategic foresight and profound empathy. She recognized that leadership is not dominance but stewardship, not assertion but cultivation. Her life had become a laboratory in which principles were tested under pressure, habits refined, and values exercised continuously. The external world, business, family, society was no longer a series of threats or arenas of conquest, but a canvas upon which she could practice and refine her moral, emotional, and cognitive faculties. Yet mastery, she knew, was never complete. Even as she reached what the world might have called success, she continued to face internal challenges. The reflexes of scarcity, competition, and fear, ingrained from early hardship, still surfaced occasionally, reminding her that evolution is ongoing. She learned to treat these intrusions with neither denial nor indulgence. Instead, she met them with patient observation, dissecting their source, acknowledging their presence, and choosing actions aligned with her cultivated values rather than the old survivalist scripts. Each encounter with these shadows reinforced a profound truth: the mind and heart must be continually exercised and calibrated, for they are the engines of life's trajectory. The 35th year brought a new dimension: mentorship and the conscious shaping of others' growth. Having navigated decades of personal evolution, she now bore witness to the struggles and aspirations of younger individuals. She recognized familiar patterns in their behavior: impatience, pride, reactive emotion, and the seductive allure of expedience over integrity. She cultivated the patience to guide, not impose, to question, not dictate, to illuminate possibilities without overshadowing them. This phase of life revealed that the deepest wisdom is generative. It multiplies when shared. It extends beyond the self, and it takes root in others as a living legacy. By the 40th year, the accumulation of decades of deliberate practice, reflection, and ethical alignment had yielded an almost intuitive understanding of life's interconnections. She could perceive, with remarkable clarity, the interplay of motive, consequence, and human psychology in situations that once seemed chaotic or opaque. She realized that mastery is not an endpoint, but an evolving continuum, a perpetual refinement of perception, judgment, and action. Her internal victories, restraint in anger, empathy in tension, clarity amidst complexity, now shaped external reality, influencing outcomes without coercion, guiding outcomes without imposing dominance. In these decades, she also came to a profound understanding of suffering. Past pain, betrayals, and scarcity were no longer merely endured or regretted. They had become instruments of insight. She could trace the threads of early trauma into patterns of behavior, recognize where fear had once dictated choices, and now deliberately choose differently. Pain had been transmuted into clarity, failure into curriculum, loss into a teacher whose lessons would endure far longer than any temporary triumph. She understood that the capacity to endure, reflect, and transform suffering is one of the most potent engines of human growth, far surpassing any external